For my video project, I decided to talk about rhetoric and postmodernism and how it affected literature. First, we're going to talk about postmodernism. So the definition of postmodernism is a late 20th century movement characterized by broad skepticism, subjectivism, realism, a general suspicion of reason, and acute sensitivity to the role of ideology in asserting and maintaining political and economic power. So that was a mouthful, and it can be kind of hard to understand. So to put that in terms that are a little bit easier to grasp, postmodernism is the idea of questioning things. So you're questioning absolute truths, and you might not even believe that there is anything as an absolute truth. So there's a lot of questioning going on, and everything is kind of subjective. There's nothing like that's truly defined. So some background information on postmodernism is it applies to art, movies, literature, philosophy. It was pretty much a change in the way of thinking. And like I said before, it was all about questioning different things. So conventional and traditional styles were kind of thrown out the window, and new things were being experimented with. This movement came about after the Second World War, and it kind of came forward when people were questioning different things that the government was doing. So like in the United States, there was issues with like McCarthyism and Red Scare and the Cold War. And so that kind of brought out like questioning the government and just questioning different things that were going on during that time. So that led to kind of moving away from traditionalism and like modernism ideas and moving towards postmodernism. So like I said, it rejects traditional theories and ways of life. So people were more accepting of like alternative lifestyles and like just experimenting with new ways of thinking and new ways of creating art, just new ways of really doing anything. So we're kind of wondering, how does postmodernism affect rhetoric? And like I talked about before, it's questioning absolutes and universal truths. So if we're questioning the universal truth and absolutes, then it's kind of hard to have like logic involved. So a lot of people who embraced this postmodern idea were wanting their audience to question things just as they were. So everything was kind of like up to individuals to make decisions for themselves about how they felt. It was never like everyone needs to feel this way, or like it wasn't persuading people to feel one way. It was more like presenting people with things and then them trying to like figure it out on their own. Okay, the next thing is viewing things in an abstract or different way compared to the rest of society. So postmodern ideas kind of go against the grain. They go against what everyone usually typically believes in. So it's just being different, having new ideas, trying different ways of thinking. Like I said, postmodernism was kind of a way of thinking. It didn't just encompass like one thing or another. It encompassed so many different things, including literature, politics, ideas. So just questioning all of those different things. So advertising, politics, literature, they all include rhetorical strategies. So all of those things were impacted by postmodern ideas. On this slide, I show a compare and contrast of modernism with postmodernism, because really the only way you can understand postmodernism is to really grasp modernism. So modernism was definitely more about traditional views and ideas. So it was all about like progression, like science and technology were viewed in a positive light. Postmodernism questions those things. They're questioning technology, questioning politics, questioning the government, questioning wars, something that definitely wasn't done before this time, at least not very openly. It talks about how like faith and politics are more important in modernism. Usually rejecting those kind of things was more of an element in postmodernism. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and connect postmodernism to literature. So postmodern literature is often known as experimental literature because people are trying out all new ideas. And when I list off these techniques that they include, some of them sound a little bit different than things that you're probably used to. They were new ideas. So a lot of authors included things such as irony and parody, metafiction, intertextuality, fragmentation, and paranoia. I don't have time to go over what all of those mean, but fragmentation, a way that you could think about that is there's no consistent flow of like how the writing is going. It's kind of scattered. There wasn't like numbered chapters in a lot of writing during this time. A lot of it was just a stream of consciousness, and it was often hard to follow, but that was part of the point. It was like making the reader do a lot of the thinking. And the paranoia was like including themes of questioning the government, questioning the war, questioning all these things that were happening within the world and the nation. Especially after the World War, it was used as a way to like scare people. Okay, so postmodern literature and rhetoric. Postmodern literature focused on elements vastly different from prose in the past. So we just talked about all of those different things that it focused on. Modernism focused more on traditional prose, a very clean and clear style, while postmodernism was a little more scrambled, jumbled, hard to follow. And that added to kind of the theme of it all. Many postmodern authors wanted to persuade readers to question traditional values and ways of life. So the novels that I'm going to be talking about as examples, every single one of them questioned the war, bombings that happened within the war. Pretty much questioning a lot of things with the government was a big one. And this was all happening around the end of the 1950s, going into the 1960s. So there was a lot of people at that time questioning the war, and that moved into like Vietnam, all of those different things. Writing is often scrambled, rarely follows a clear writing style. We already talked about that point. But it made the reader have to do a lot of thinking on their own. So we talked about no absolute truth. This kind of let the reader think for themselves, and they were presented with all these different ideas in kind of a jumbled way, and they kind of had to put it together to form their own thoughts. Okay, last I'm just going to share 3 different examples of postmodern literature and kind of how rhetoric is involved with all of those things and what the purpose of these books was. One of the most popular postmodern books was Gravity's Rainbow, and this author talks about Germany and just different things that were going on during the war. It's a very interesting book to try to read. It's kind of hard to follow, but it makes the reader think about things like bombs, and there's a lot of elements of like science and technology involved in all of it. And it's just kind of like skeptical. So with this novel, the author was just trying to get readers to question things such as, you know, is the war helpful? Are bombings helpful? Is all of this technological advancement really helping society, or is it actually causing more damage? Because a lot of the things that happened within the war, like the bombs being made and the technological advancements in weapons, were actually causing a lot of harm. So I think that the whole purpose was to get readers to really think about the effects that this stuff was having. Next novel is Slaughterhouse-Five, and this is one of the most popular American novels to come out of the postmodern times, and it again is about the war, questioning the war, very similar to the last one we talked about, questioning technology. And another thing about this novel is it doesn't follow a very clear path. It doesn't have chapters. It's broken into different sections, but it's kind of a timeline of events that goes back and forth. There's a lot of unreliable narrator and intertextuality, and then the paranoia part is there because it talks about elements of the war. This is pretty much showcasing all of the themes and techniques that we talked about from postmodern literature. I read this my sophomore year in college, and it was a very difficult read, but it was really interesting. You had to definitely be invested in the novel to truly understand the purpose behind it. Okay, the last one is Catch-22, and this is another one that is super popular. When we think of postmodern literature, it's often still read in schools. Again, it's about World War II. We're seeing a theme with these novels. A lot of them are wanting people to really think about questioning the war and the different events that revolved around it. Almost every single one of these novels that you pull from postmodern shelves talks about the war, bombings, science, technology. It's wanting people to form their own opinions about this. They don't want people to just accept what the government's telling them, that, socialism is bad, or the Cold War is bad, the Red Scare, all of those things that were happening around that time. And then as they were approaching Vietnam, it just was asking people to really think about, what are the effects of these different things going on. So in conclusion, postmodernism, literature, and rhetoric all kind of go together because it brought a lot of new ideas to the table for literature. Rhetoric was definitely used to persuade people to think for themselves, and a lot of the writing done at that time was pretty complicated, complex, and hard to understand, so it made people have to really think for themselves.